Let's now see how we can read from our file. For first reading, we will use readAll function from our IOUtil package, and with this function we will read all bytes inside of our files. If we print value of our data variable, we will get slice of bytes. If we want value of data type string for our data variable, we can use printf function, so we can print string format from our variable. Also, with function len, we can see the length of slice of bytes which we have inside of our file. This was the first way for reading our files. Let's now see how we can read one specific number of bytes from our file. We will open the same file, but now we will use readFull function from our IO package. First, with built-in function make, we will create a new variable as data type slice of bytes, and length of that slice will be 2. Now we want to call our readFull function. So in this case, we will read first 2 bytes from our file. If we can't read at least 2 bytes from our file, our function readFull will give us an error. We can print value of our num bytes read variable, so we can see how many bytes did we read, and we can see specific value of data type string. We didn't get an error, and we can see that we have read 2 bytes. Also, we can see that first 2 bytes inside of our text3 file was 2 character A and B uppercase. Let's see how we can read specific number of bytes in case where we can read at least some slice of bytes inside of our file. We will also open the same file, and now we will create 2 new variables. We will create byte slice and the minimum bytes. We want to use our readAtLeast function from our IO package. For this case, our function will return us an error if we cannot find at least minimum bytes to read inside of our file, which means if we can't read at least 8 bytes from our file, this function will give us an error. After that, if there is at least 8 bytes, it will read as many bytes as we can hold inside of our byte slice variable. So in this case, we can hold 32 bytes. Our full length of bytes inside of our file is 19, which means that in this case, our reader can hold whole data from our file. We can print values of these 2 variables, so we can see how our function read our file. We can see that the number of bytes which we read from our file is 19, and below that we can see specific string value from our file. Now let's see how we can read our file line by line. For this example, we will open our test1 file from our testing2 directory. Then we will create new variable reader, which will be our new reader, by calling new reader function from our buffio package. We will do that by passing our file variable, which is our buffer, to our new reader function. We will create 2 new variables, line and counter. After that, we will create new infinity for loop. Inside of our infinity for loop, we will assign new values to our line and error variables. We will do that by accessing our reader variable and then calling our read string. we will pass specific value to our function. In this case, this will be special character /n, which means that if our reader finds this character inside of our string, that means that we are at end of this line. So on that place, our string will be separated as one separated line. Then we will check if there is any error. In case where we find error, we will execute our break function so we can go outside from our infinity loop. Then we will increase our value of our counter variable by 1, and after that we want to print how many characters inside of our string we read, and we want to print specific value on that line. After this, we want to check specific type of our error. We want to know if our error has error type EOF from our EO package. EOF means end of file. So we want to know if we reach end of file. If we reach that point, everything is fine. But if our error isn't end of file, we will print value of that specific error. When we print our output, we will get 2 lines, and each line will have specific string value. We can also read our file line by line in another way. Each time when we open new buffer, we must remember that at some point we must close it. So, on places where we won't use anymore our specific buffer, we must close that buffer. We will create 2 new variables, counter and scanner, where our scanner variable will be new scanner created by function new scanner from our Buffio package. We will pass our file variable, which is our buffer, to our new scanner. We will open our infinity for loop, but in another way. In previous example, we had a read string function and we assigned new value for our delimiter. Delimiter is value on which we will separate our lines inside of our file. For our infinity loop, we will access our scanner and we will call our scan function. We don't specify any delimiter because now in this case we have default value of our delimiter and it is special character /n. Then inside of our for loop we will increase value of our counter variable and then we will check if there is any error inside of our scanner variable. In case where we find error, we can print our error in our log and we can execute our continue function, which means that that specific line will be skipped and we will continue with reading next line. If we don't find error, we want to print number of line which we are reading. We want to print how many bytes we read from that specific line, and we want to print value from that line as data type string. Let's now see how we can truncate our file to a specific number of bytes. For this example, we can call our truncate function from our OS package. This function will leave for us inside of our file only specific number of bytes which we assigned to our truncate function as second input variable. Old string inside of our file was this. After we execute our function, we will leave only 3 bytes inside of our file, which means that new content of our file will be A, B, C.